Occupational stress occurs when we're in an environment at work and we feel very anxious or depressed about the setting that we're in. And this may be because of something that we're bringing into the situation, or it can be something that is caused by the situation that we're in at work. So bullying, disempowerment, excessive work schedules, isolation, feeling that one's in a politically charged environment in which people feel the need to kind of temper what they're saying in the context of who will like and dislike it. All these things bring stress to individuals. Typically, in my own research with my PhD students in the past, we've shown that the social environment is one of the key elements that causes occupational stress. We showed, for example, in one study that people who had two bosses of the same sex and status that they worked with on separate days were much more stressed on the days they were working with a negatively perceived boss. Stressed, in fact, to the point that they had systematic elevations of both systolic and diastolic blood pressure, measured what's called in an ambulatory way. So just during the day, the cuff would inflate, measure their blood pressure. And on the days they were working with the negatively perceived boss, they had these stress responses which gave rise to higher blood pressure. And indeed, the significance of that is that over a course of a long time, that could have significant negative health consequences for people. Typically anxiety, because one would feel under threat at work, but very possibly also depression. There's anxiety and depression often run together. And people who are anxious are likely to be a little bit depressed, and people who are depressed are likely to be a little bit anxious as well. It's called a transdiagnostic approach, which is an important way to conceive these things. There's some research to show that the bigger the organization, the greater the stress, which is kind of interesting. And there are going to be complicated and interesting reasons for that. But it's a major issue, and it is to me interesting that small organizations seem to be better for people in that regard. Very high workloads can cause people occupational distress. Having a boss that is uncongenial, talking down to people. I call it the smile up, spit down theory of management, which is a very, very bad way to run an organization. All these sorts of things can lead people to be stressed at work. Yes, so if one is socially anxious and there's lots of social challenge at work, then people are likely to find that more difficult. Again, by exposing oneself to the challenge, the habituation will tend to take place and people will tend to get over time more comfortable. But that's not likely to happen if people are being persecuted at work for various reasons. And my general advice to people is you should not be tolerating persecution. You should be trying to do the best possible job you can and taking full personal responsibility for things, but you shouldn't accept being talked down to or mistreated in other ways. Oftentimes, one needs to help people be more assertive when they're on strong ground, when the arguments that they're presenting are solid and true. Then you've really got to get people to be a bit more assertive. A lot of life involves being assertive. Good things and bad things happen because of assertiveness. And so to be fairly assertive, you need to be sure that the grounds that you're on are robust, and you would want to discuss that with friends, family, or a psychologist. And then to be clear in the workplace as to what is reasonable, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. Steep occupational hierarchies are more difficult to be assertive within. More level, more flat ones are easier to be more assertive in. If none of that works, ultimately, one needs probably to look for a better job in which people are behaving better, because challenging occupational hierarchies, particularly when they're steep, are often very, very difficult. People don't like being challenged under those circumstances, and they'll just use the hierarchy to kind of push down dissent. So it's a combination of assertiveness, or job seeking.